Peter squinted through the rain, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the dense undergrowth. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, a metallic tang that twisted his gut. He stumbled over a gnarled root, nearly falling. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the drumming of rain on leaves. This was no ordinary night in the park. Something was wrong. It was more than just the eerie silence that seemed to envelop the forest, or the feeling of being watched from the shadows. It was the gut-wrenching certainty that he was not alone. The trees seemed to close in around him, as if they were part of some great, malevolent force intent on keeping him from whatever lay ahead. He forced himself to move forward, the beam of his flashlight illuminating the muddy trail before him. The rain pelted his jacket, making it difficult to see through the mist. Peter's mind drifted back to the summer of his 10th year, when he had first encountered the creature that had haunted his dreams ever since. It had been a full moon, just like tonight, and the beast had been prowling around the edges of the woods, its howls piercing the night like knives. He remembered the blood-streaked fur, the razor-sharp claws, the unnatural strength it had shown when it had attacked him. Shaking off the memories, he rounded a bend in the trail and came face to face with the source of his unease. A body lay sprawled on the ground, twisted and torn apart, its flesh clawed and rent as if by some wild animal. The sight sent a shiver down Peter's spine, and for a moment he couldn't move. It was only when he forced himself to approach that he realized the horror was even worse than he had imagined. "Hello?" he called out, his voice thin and reedy in the silence. "Is anybody there?" There was no reply, only the sound of the rain and the distant howl of a wolf. Peter crouched down beside the body, feeling the cold, wet earth seep through his pants. The woman's face was a bloody, unrecognizable mess, but something about her seemed familiar. He couldn't quite place it. As he reached out to close her staring eyes, he felt a sudden chill run down his spine. "What have you done to her?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "And who are you?" Peter glanced up, startled by the sound of his own voice. In the dim light of his flashlight, he could just make out the shadows of trees swaying in the distance. He stood slowly, his legs feeling weak beneath him. "Whoever you are," he called out, "you need to stop this. You need to stop hurting people." The forest seemed to press in around him, closing off all avenues of escape. He shivered, wishing he had someone to turn to, someone who might believe him. But he knew that wasn't an option. Not anymore. He took a step forward, moving deeper into the woods, following the trail of blood that led away from the body. His heart pounded in his chest, a frantic rhythm that threatened to drown out the sound of his own thoughts. As he moved deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and the trees seemed to close in around him even more. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that whatever was responsible for this carnage was still close by, waiting for the right moment to strike again. A branch snapped nearby, making him jump. He whirled around, his flashlight sweeping through the trees, but saw nothing. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. "Is it you? Is it you who's been doing these things?" There was no reply. Peter took a steadying breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He knew he couldn't give in to fear. Not now. He had to find whoever was responsible for this, and put a stop to it. As he continued to search, he found himself growing more and more disoriented. The forest seemed to twist and turn in on itself, like a labyrinth designed to confuse and trap him. He wondered if this was how it had felt for the woman who lay dead back there, if she had felt the same sense of helplessness and despair before her final moments. A shadow flitted across the ground nearby, and Peter's heart leapt into his throat. "Show yourself!" he shouted, his voice hoarse from fear and exertion. "I know you're there!" There was no reply, but the shadow moved again, this time closer to him. He swallowed hard, feeling a chill race down his spine. Whatever it was that lurked in these woods, it was close now. Very close. And it seemed to be toying with him. "I'm not afraid of you," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the patter of raindrops on the leaves. "No matter what you are, I'm not afraid." As if in response, the shadow detached itself from the darkness and took form. It was a man, tall and gaunt, with eyes that burned like embers in the night. His skin was pale and unnaturally smooth, like that of a corpse risen from the grave. He wore a long, tattered cloak that billowed around him in the wind, obscuring his features. Peter backed away, his heart racing in terror. "Who are you?" he managed to croak. "What do you want from me?" The figure did not speak, merely cocked its head to the side, studying Peter with an unnerving intensity. It took a step forward, and another, slowly closing the distance between them. Peter felt trapped, like a mouse caught in the gaze of a hungry cat. He reached for his flashlight, hoping to use its beam to drive the figure back. As he did so, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving only the sound of the rain. Peter stood frozen in place, his heart pounding in his chest. "Don't leave me alone," he whispered, his voice cracking with fear. "Please don't leave me here." He waited, listening intently for any sign of movement. When he heard nothing but the rain, he forced himself to take a step forward, then another. The forest seemed to close in around him, pressing in on all sides, but he forced himself to keep moving, to keep searching for whatever it was that lurked in these dark, twisted woods. As he continued his search, he found himself wondering if he had somehow stumbled into a nightmare, if the events of the past few hours were nothing more than the fevered imaginings of a restless mind. But no matter how hard he tried to convince himself that it was all just a bad dream, he knew that it wasn't. He could still feel the cold, wet earth beneath his feet, and the blood on his hands. He paused for a moment, leaning against a tree, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "This can't be real," he whispered. "It just can't." But as he wiped the rain from his face, he knew that it was. It was real, and it was horrifying. And if he didn't find a way to stop it, soon enough the whole world would know just how terrible it could be. He forced himself to continue, moving deeper into the forest, searching for any sign that would lead him to whatever it was that had been terrorizing him. The trees seemed to close in around him, trapping him in a suffocating embrace, but he fought against the panic that threatened to overwhelm him. As he walked, he tried to make sense of what had happened, to find some rational explanation for the events of the past few hours. But no matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to fit. It was as if he had stumbled into some sort of nightmare world where the laws of reality no longer applied. His foot struck something hard, and he looked down to find a small, metal object gleaming in the moonlight. He bent down to pick it up, frowning as he examined it. It looked like a piece of jewelry, or perhaps some sort of key. Whatever it was, it felt oddly warm to the touch, as if it were somehow alive. He slipped the object into his pocket, still puzzling over its meaning. As he did so, he heard a distant howl pierce the air, sending a shiver down his spine. It sounded like the same wolf he had heard earlier, but it seemed closer this time. Much closer. He quickened his pace, unsure of what he would find when he reached the source of the sound. But he knew that he had to keep moving, to keep searching for answers. Because if he didn't, he was afraid of what might happen next. The trees parted suddenly, revealing a small clearing at the center of the forest. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, cloaked in darkness. Even from this distance, Peter could feel the figure's gaze burning into him, as if it could see right through him. He forced himself to walk forward, his heart pounding in his chest. As he drew closer, he could see that the figure was holding something in its hand, something glinting in the moonlight. It was a jeweled dagger, covered in blood. "I know what you've done," Peter whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of his own heartbeat. "And I'm going to stop you." The figure did not respond, merely watching him intently. Peter took another step forward, feeling a surge of determination wash over him. Whatever this thing was, whatever it had done, it wasn't going to hurt anyone else. Not if he could help it. He raised his hand slowly, trying to appear non-threatening. "Look, I don't know what you want, or why you're doing this, but I can help you. I can make sure everyone knows the truth. We can stop this together." The figure remained silent, its dark cloak billowing in the night breeze. Peter took another step closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "Please, you don't have to keep doing this." There has to be another way. The figure's head tilted slightly to the side, and for a moment Peter thought he saw a glint of something other than hate in its eyes. But then the figure straightened, its expression once again hard and unyielding. "You are a fool, boy," it hissed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Before Peter could react, the figure lunged forward, thrusting the jeweled dagger towards him. He managed to dodge the attack, rolling out of the way just in time. He scrambled to his feet, drawing his sword as he did so. "Then teach me," he shouted, his voice echoing through the forest. "Teach me what I need to know to stop this." The figure smiled, a chilling sight in the pale moonlight. "Very well," it said, and vanished into the shadows. Peter stood there, his sword raised, waiting for the figure to reappear. He knew that he couldn't rest until he had found some way to stop whatever it was that had been terrorizing him. And even though he was terrified, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of determination burning inside of him. As he waited, he heard a howl rip through the air, closer this time than ever before. It was the wolf, and it was coming for him. But Peter was ready. He would not let it, or whatever else was out there, harm anyone else. He would find a way to stop it, no matter the cost. The figure reappeared a few feet away, its dark cloak billowing in the night breeze. In its other hand, it held a book, its leather binding worn and faded with age. "This," it hissed, "is the key to stopping what you fear. But be warned, it is not an easy path you walk. It will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Peter took a step forward, his sword still raised. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. "Teach me what I need to know." The figure nodded, motioning for him to follow. It led him deeper into the forest, to a small clearing surrounded by ancient, towering trees. At the center of the clearing stood a massive, ancient oak, its branches reaching up to the sky like gnarled fingers. The figure gestured for him to kneel before the tree. "This is the tree of knowledge," it said, its voice barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. "It holds within its roots the wisdom of the ages, the secrets of the universe. To gain its power, you must first prove yourself worthy." Peter knelt before the tree, feeling its ancient power emanating from its gnarled roots. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses, trying to feel the connection between himself and the tree. He could feel its ancient wisdom flowing through him, filling him with a sense of purpose and determination. "I am ready," he said, opening his eyes. "Teach me what I need to know." The figure nodded, stepping back to give him space. "The first lesson," it began, "is to understand the nature of the beast you face. It is not a single creature, nor is it merely some malevolent force. It is a reflection of your own fears and doubts, given form by your deepest, darkest emotions." Peter listened intently, his heart racing as the figure spoke. "To defeat it, you must first confront those fears and doubts within yourself. You must face them head-on, and find a way to overcome them." The figure gestured towards the book in its hand. "This tome contains spells and incantations that will aid you in your quest. But they are not enough on their own. You must master their use, and come to understand their true purpose. Only then will you be able to harness their power against the darkness that plagues your dreams." Peter took the book from the figure, his hands trembling with anticipation and fear. He flipped through its yellowed pages, feeling the weight of knowledge within its worn leather binding. "What do I do now?" he asked, looking up at the figure. The figure smiled grimly. "Now you begin the long and arduous path to mastering the art of magic. It will not be easy, nor will it be without cost. But if you are willing to put in the effort, and to face your own fears along the way, you may yet have a chance to save yourself, and those you care about most." It gestured towards the ancient tree once more. "You must return to this place, at dawn and dusk each day, to study and practice the spells within this book. The knowledge within its pages will be your guide, but it is up to you to understand its true meaning, and to apply it in your battle against the darkness." Peter nodded, his determination burning bright. "I will not fail," he said, clutching the book tightly. "I will master these spells, and I will save my village." The figure seemed to smile, though the expression was more sad than happy. "Then let us begin," it said softly. And with that, it disappeared into the shadows, leaving Peter alone with the ancient oak and the knowledge it had imparted to him. As the figure faded from sight, Peter felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement coursing through his veins. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but he also knew that he could not turn back now. Rising to his feet, he turned back towards the village, his steps sure and steady as he prepared to embark on the most important quest of his life. The days that followed were filled with long hours of study beneath the ancient oak. Peter pored over the pages of the book, committing its spells and incantations to memory. He learned to cast simple spells at first, such as lighting fires and summoning small animals, before progressing to more complex rituals involving elemental forces and the summoning of protective wards. As he delved deeper into the book's secrets, Peter began to feel a strange connection to the magic that flowed through his veins. It was as if the ancient knowledge had become a part of him, guiding his every move and helping him to see the world in a new light. He found himself able to tap into reservoirs of power he never knew existed, and the spells he cast grew stronger with each passing day. One morning, as he was sitting cross-legged beneath the oak tree, studying the properties of fire magic, a strange sensation came over him. He felt a tingling in his fingers, as if they were alive with energy, and when he looked down at his hands, he saw tendrils of flame dancing along his fingertips. Startled, he snuffed them out quickly, certain that someone had seen him. But no one came, and as he continued to study the book, he realized that this was just the beginning. The sun dipped below the horizon, marking the end of another day of study. Peter stood and stretched, feeling a newfound confidence in his abilities. He knew that he was closer than ever to being ready to face the darkness that plagued his dreams, and the thought filled him with determination. As he turned back towards the village, he made a silent vow to himself: he would save his home, no matter the cost. The journey through the darkened forest seemed to pass more quickly now that he felt prepared. The ancient oak had taught him well, and he found himself able to navigate the treacherous terrain with ease, using his magic to create makeshift bridges and light his way through the darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he emerged from the trees and found himself standing before the village gates. They were shut tight, the wood splintered and charred from the battle that had taken place. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead, and then cast a spell of illusion, causing the gates to appear open and unguarded. It was a simple spell, but one that had taken him weeks to master. He knew it would be enough to fool the creatures that now roamed the village streets. Silently, he slipped through the gates and into the heart of the village. The streets were dark and eerily quiet, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant howl of a wolf. The houses stood empty, their doors hanging off their hinges and their windows shattered. It was as if everyone had simply vanished, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. As he made his way towards the center of the village, he heard a low growl coming from behind a nearby shed. His heart raced, but he remained calm, focusing his energy on his surroundings. There, crouched in the shadows, was a hideous beast, its claws digging into the dirt, and its yellow eyes fixed on him. It was larger than any wolf he had ever seen, its fur matted and dirty, its teeth bared in a snarl. Peter took a deep breath and raised his hands, summoning a small ball of fire in his palms. The beast's ears perked up at the sound, and it let out a deep, menacing growl. Slowly it began to creep forward, its muscles tense and ready to spring. Peter felt the familiar tingle of fear in his stomach, but he forced it down, focusing instead on the ancient oak's teachings. "I am not afraid of you," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "I am here to save my home, and I will not let anything stand in my way." The beast growled again, baring its teeth, but Peter did not flinch. Instead, he hurled the ball of fire at it, watching as it engulfed the creature in a fiery inferno. The beast let out a terrible howl of pain before collapsing to the ground, twitching convulsively. Peter stood over the creature for a moment, catching his breath, before continuing on his way. He knew that there would be many more creatures like this one, but he also knew that he had the power to defeat them. The ancient oak had given him the strength and knowledge he needed to save his village, and he would not let it down. As he reached the center of the village, he saw the source of the destruction, a massive, towering figure of stone and vines, its face twisted in an eternal scream. The ancient oak had warned him about it, the avatar of the forest's wrath. It had been awakened by the foolish actions of the villagers, and now it sought vengeance. Peter knew that he had to stop the creature before it destroyed everything he loved. He drew his sword, feeling the weight of its metal hilt in his hand. The blade had been forged by the village blacksmith, and it had been passed down through generations of his family. It was the symbol of his duty to protect the village, and now he would use it against the ancient oak's avatar. He approached the monstrous figure cautiously, his sword raised in front of him. The air around it shimmered with unnatural power, and the ground trembled with each of its steps. The creature turned its glowing yellow eyes towards him, and a low rumble emanated from its chest. "I am Peter," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. "I am the guardian of this village. You will not destroy what is mine." The creature let out a deafening roar, and Peter braced himself for the attack. But instead of charging forward, the monster paused, cocking its head to the side as if considering him. Slowly it lowered its massive stone fists, its eyes studying him intently. "You are not like the others," it rumbled. "You carry the mark of the ancient oak. I sense its magic within you." Peter felt a surge of hope rise within him. Perhaps there was still a way to convince the creature to spare the village. He took a step forward, extending his free hand in a gesture of peace. "I have come to make amends for the wrongs my people have done to you. We meant no harm, and we will do whatever it takes to make things right." The creature considered his words for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Very well," it growled. "You have proven yourself worthy. You may return to your village, but know this: the balance between our worlds has been disturbed. It is up to you and your people to find a way to restore it." With that, the ancient oak's avatar turned away, disappearing into the depths of the forest. Peter stood there for a while, catching his breath, before turning back towards the village. He felt a mix of relief and responsibility wash over him. The village had been spared, but they still had a long road ahead of them. They needed to find a way to repair the damage they had done to the forest, and to live in harmony with it once more. As he approached the outskirts of the village, he could see the people gathering, waiting for news of his success. He raised his sword above his head, signaling to them that their home was safe. The crowd erupted into cheers, embracing one another and weeping with relief. Peter made his way through the celebration, his heart filled with pride and determination. Throughout the night, the villagers worked tirelessly to repair the damage they had done to the forest. They cleared away the fallen trees and burned the charred remains, replanting new saplings in their place. They built makeshift bridges across the streams and rivers, ensuring that the wildlife could cross safely. And they worked together to clean up the mess they had made, returning the land to its natural state. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Peter stood before the ancient oak, his sword sheathed at his side. He bowed his head in gratitude, knowing that it was because of the tree's wisdom and power that they had been saved. "Thank you," he whispered. "We will not forget your guidance, or the sacrifices you have made." With a sigh, he turned away from the tree, ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring. But he did so with a newfound sense of purpose and resolve, knowing that he had been chosen to lead his people back to a brighter future. The ancient oak had given him the strength and knowledge he needed to save his village, and now it was up to him to guide them towards redemption. The villagers continued their work in the forest, their movements now more careful and respectful. They spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid to disturb the delicate balance that had been restored. Peter walked among them, offering words of encouragement and guidance whenever they were needed. He could see the hope in their eyes, and he knew that it was his responsibility to nurture that hope and help it grow. As the sun began to rise higher in the sky, Peter paused for a moment to take in the beauty of the forest. The birds sang in the trees, their songs carrying on the gentle breeze. The river flowed calmly, its waters sparkling in the sunlight. It was a stark contrast to the scene that had played out just a day ago, and Peter couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and gratitude wash over him. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be obstacles and challenges to overcome, but he also knew that they would face them together, as one people, united by their determination to make things right. The ancient oak had given them a second chance, and he vowed to do everything in his power to ensure that they did not waste it. As the rays of sunlight danced through the treetops, Peter turned back to the ancient oak, his heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. He knelt before the tree, bowing his head in prayer, offering up a silent thanks for the wisdom and guidance it had given him. And as he stood once more, he knew that he was no longer just the guardian of his village, but the steward of a new, more balanced world, where the ancient oak and its people could live together in harmony, forevermore. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories, give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.